What's up, everybody? Blake, the Scholar of Magic here. And today we are with Illuna, Apex of Wishes. This is a 2, green, blue, and red. Legendary creature, beast, elemental, dinosaur. What's special about this commander is that it has mutate, which is a really interesting mechanic. And I've played mutate commanders before. Brokos in particular was my first mutate commander. That is differing because it plays black in its mana cost, so you get access to black spells. And what happened is I ended up trying all sorts of commanders because I liked all the mutate cards, and I really liked the 5-color aspect of being able to play Snapdax, for instance, and Nethroi. I really like those cards a lot too. So I tried some other commanders. There's no 5-color mutate creature that has mutate in its mechanic at this point. But maybe down the road we will have one. That would be very cool. But for now, I believe Illuna is one of those better options. And the reason why is because it has a really nice enter the battlefield mutate, or a successful mutate if the mutate does resolve. So let's read the card. Mutate 3, red, green, blue, blue. If you cast a spell for its mutate's cost, put it over or under target non-human creature you own. They mutate into the creature on top, plus all abilities from under it. So that's the mutate characteristic. So it's an additional 1. You could just cast this card for the 5 cost and have a 6/6 flyer, right? But if you want to mutate, it's going to be an additional colorless or generic mana, and then you can play red or green for one of the costs, and then 2 blue. So that's an interesting casting cost. It has flying and trample still. Whenever this creature mutates, exile cards from the top of your library until you exile a non-land permanent card. Put that card onto the battlefield or into your hand. Now, what's really interesting about that is that there's not many cards that kind of grant you such a strong, kind of free cast and kind of like a, really an RNG type of, dice roll. I mean, this thing can basically pull anything, off the, out of your library, basically. And there's some builds in general that will kind of play Omniscience, or really strong big bombs like the one with the multiverse. You'll see kind of decks basically that their primary objective for Illuna is just to mutate onto a token and just play instants or sorceries that are not considered permanents. And you don't have to worry about non-land permanents as well, just lands. So basically you can find just an Omniscience, for instance, and just start free casting spells from your hand with an Illuna. And you just basically have to get up to that 6 mana to mutate on to something. So honestly, just what a powerful card. In general, if you wanted to go that route, you could, and that's totally cool if that's what you're into. I just like kind of Landfall. I kind of I just like Landfall characteristics, for instance. And, I'm not going to be kind of too sad of not building a deck that just primary objective is to find Omniscience and start free casting. So we're going to go through the deck now and just kind of get an idea of some of the major players for Mutate and Landfall in general for me. So what's a really nice creature, of course, for our Mutate commander is a Slippery Boggle. And what happens when you mutate, you have to kind of imagine that you're a good word for it is 2 for 1 in yourself, basically, because you're losing a creature, right? You're losing the creature that you're mutating onto, and it kind of opens yourself up to getting some devastating removal, for instance. So, for instance, say for instance I mutate a Sea Dasher Octopus onto Birds of Paradise. And those are just both very valuable cards. I produce mana with the birds, and of course, if I connect with a creature once it's mutated on, I'll draw a card with a Sea Dasher. So the problem is though that there's very vulnerable. And say for instance, someone has a single target removal spell, and all of a sudden you're down 2 cards and you're down tempo, and it's just kind of a really big kind of tempo loss. So when we're doing these kind of mutates, it's kind of important that we kind of offer ourselves protection. If we have access to white, you could run Giver of Runes or Skrelv. However, for our purposes, we'll be running the Slippery Boggle. And that's just nice. It just has hexproof. So that's just a really good kind of feature for us, is that we could just run a card where we can go ahead and mutate a Luna over this and create a hexproof 6/6 Luna. So that's how the mutate works, is we just keep those characteristics of the card underneath, and we get all the nice attributes from the top, like the 6/6 and flying, trample, and in addition we'll also gain hexproof. So I mean, that's kind of where we want to be, and then we can keep mutating onto Illuna and re-triggering the card over and over again. So here's the new addition on the block, guys, and I couldn't believe the wording on this card, and I still am kind of amazed. Like, this card is so amazing for this deck. So you can imagine a sequence where you go like Slippery Boggle, or you just cast Frontline Heroism, because what's really interesting about the Frontline Heroism is it actually creates a token by itself, which is also very interesting. So let's just say, for instance, I cast Frontline Heroism, and then I'm ready to mutate Illuna. What's going to happen is I'm going to mutate Illuna over that 1/1 red soldier creature token that's already on the battlefield, and then Frontline Heroism is going to see that mutate, and it's going to copy the mutated card. And it's going to be able to create another token, and it's going to receive that mutate that's copied, which is Illuna. You can just put that one underneath so you don't legend rule yourself. And then you have 2 instances of Illuna, and you're bringing out 2 permanents from your library right onto the battlefield that are non-lands. So it's just like really crazy stuff. And so what we think about with Illuna, what are the stuff that we get? We get enchantments will hit the board, artifacts will hit the board, and creatures will hit the board. So those are the kind of things that we're, looking to see that's going to come off the top of our deck when we mutate Illuna. So having 2 instances of that on curve is just fantastic for us with Frontline Heroism. And in addition, Ivy does a similar characteristic. So both of these cards are just amazing together. I couldn't imagine having an Ivy and a Frontline Heroism on the battlefield at the same time. Then you're like getting into some serious value. But I mean, in general, just copying Illuna twice, like with an Ivy or a Frontline Heroism, is just kind of very good. The criteria that would be a little bit different is that you would have to have a creature on the battlefield to go along with Ivy to get that double instance of Illuna. And I mean, it'd be up to you to decide like where you want to put the Illuna on top. I mean, the Ivy already has flying, so perhaps you want to put the Illuna over, one of the other creatures you have on the battlefield, perhaps like a Llanowar Elf, and that would be sufficient. And then you get 2 instances of Illuna again and 2 triggers. So this card is just also very good. Vesuvian Duplimancy is also just another really interesting card. The thing about the Vesuvian Duplimancy is that's the instance where like maybe you want to make 2 Ivies, and you would like lose out on a trigger for Ivy, because you'd be targeting Ivy yourself. But having 2 Ivies on the battlefield is nothing to scoff at. And that would be a very interesting, route to take with the Vesuvian Duplimancy. Otherwise, what Vesuvian Duplimancy is going to really enjoy is that it's going to really enjoy like your legendary enter the battlefield cards, like for instance, Illumra. Like mutating onto Illumra would be very beneficial, because then you have another instance of Illumra that wasn't considered legendary, and you'd be able to mill those 4 cards, and then all the lands that were into your graveyard at the time would pop back onto the battlefield. We also have some really nice regular enter the battlefield creature cards that aren't legendary, since like Solemn Simulacrum or Blossoming Tortoise or even a Avenger of Zendikar. All those creatures would be wonderful to, have a Vesuvian Duplimancy and then mutate onto something, and then getting those enter the battlefield triggers over again. Illuna also really benefits from like abilities like to manipulate the top of your deck. So if we have a Worldly Tutor in hand and we're ready to mutate, and we have all the mana that we need, we can think about our toolbox of creatures that will benefit us for that certain situation. And what's great is with the Worldly Tutors, we can go put any of those creatures on the very top of our library. So when we mutate Illuna, Illuna will see, and when it resolves, it will see that top card and put it right onto the battlefield. Because you just keep revealing until you that trigger, until you have a non-land permanent to hit the battlefield. So with Worldly Tutor, we can just put any creature we want on the top of our deck. Very strong card, obviously. So let's think about some of the targets that we really like. I mean, Ashaya has just got to be one of the, tops for Landfall just to cast, or even to like trying to bring it out with an Illuna. I mean, just think about this card. It's going to see itself as a land, so it really helps all your landfall triggers. It will scale up as it sees creatures and lands enter the battlefield, which is kind of amazing. Um, and additional, as your non-tokens keep entering, they will enter as lands, so they'll keep, triggering your landfall, synergies. In addition, all your creatures will also be considered lands themselves, so you can actually dodge things like Cyclonic Rift and stuff, which is really insane. Which is really cool because your permanents, your creature permanents would be considered lands. In addition, they'll also tap for mana, which is really good. So Ashaya is a $5 card now, and you should definitely go get it if you haven't got it yet. It's just a powerhouse. Let's think of basically like a Crater Hoof that's 2 mana less, and then you have your Moraug, and honestly, that's kind of like where it's at. Where this card in the Landfall deck, or just in general in any deck, is just kind of like devastating. And how Moraug works, and people have been gotten by this card, like how the combat steps work, and it's just like it's just kind of interesting, how you want to go about triggering this. Like, for instance, say you used a lot of mana dorks and you played a land before your main phase. What's going to happen is all those mana dorks would untap, and then you would go into your additional combat steps. It's a really interesting card, like how you have to kind of order this thing. And from what I've read is that how you best want to go about, you just want to make sure that you're playing additional lands after your first combat, because if you can do that, you're going to continue to get those combat steps. So, for instance, maybe I don't have enough. Maybe I don't have maybe I want to trigger an additional combat step, and I want to do so. I can do so, for instance, after my first combat. So instead of playing the land, on my first combat, or in my first, before my combat step, I'll play the land after my first combat, and then you can kind of untap your things, which would be nice, right? Because that's how you want to have that untap phase. You want to untap your things, right? So that's how you would go about that. And it is a very strangely worded card. But that's basically, if you want to kind of utilize it, you want to basically go into your combat step, and then afterwards, then play your land so you can untap your things, and then continue that chain if you can. There's Blossoming Tortoise would be a great example of kind of continuing those combat steps as you go. And you probably wouldn't be remiss to even play a land before your first combat, as long as you can keep the lands coming. You're going to be pretty good to continue those untapping your things and continue those combat steps. So once again, just a very strange card in general, and you can even look it up on Reddit. And I'd say the best course of action is just to basically skip playing the land if you can. Probably likely before your first combat, go into combat with Moraug, do your attacks, play your land, then have the trigger of untapping all your things and having an additional combat step after that phase. So let's just read the card in general, because people do think this is a real big headache, and even explaining it is kind of frustrating. But each creature you control gets 1/0 for each time it has attacked this turn. Landfall: whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, if it's your main phase, there's an additional combat phase after this phase. At the beginning of that combat, untap all creatures you control. So that's why I think you want to order it. You don't want to order it before your combat, because you want to be able to continue to untap all your creatures, correct? So if you wanted an instance of combat and then untapping and then having another combat, you're going to want to save that land until after your first combat step. So very interesting card in general, very strong. All right, we got through that. Now let's talk about Lumra, Bellow of the Woods. And this is just a very straightforward card, unlike Moraug, where its power and toughness is equal to the number of lands you control, has vigilance and reach. Whenever Luma enters, mill 4 cards and return all land cards from your graveyard to the battlefield tap. Of course, we know this is, very powerful because there's fetch lands and there's ways, green has so many ways to build its graveyard. So, there's not uncommon to put like 7 lands at once. And imagine like you have like, you're in a pod and someone's playing Mesmeric Orb and they're just like making your graveyard real fat. You're going to put all your lands basically on the battlefield at once. So Luma is just kind of fantastic like that. Really good glue for this deck. And then Ancient Green Warden is that really cool tech card because we want to increase our chances of like continuing our, high rolls for Illuna. So for instance, like we, mutate onto Illuna and we get an Ancient Green Warden, we can keep our lands going because we can start playing from our graveyard, the lands, and we get additional landfall triggers. So that's some really nice stuff for the Ancient Green Warden. I really like that card here. And then Royal Elemental, this was just kind of in my collection from like when I was a child and a younger boy. And now it's back. And now we can play Royal Elemental too. And this is just like a sweet one where, we'll go ahead and start putting lands on the battlefield and taking control of like our opponent's creatures as long as the Royal Elemental stays on the battlefield. So that's awesome. Here's Avenger of Zendikar, and this one is just amazing too, right? Where it's going to see all the lands we control and then create the 0/1 green plant creature tokens for each land that we do control. And then they get stronger as lands enter the battlefield. So just like another sweet landfall benefit, payoff. Of course, these would be so cool. You can imagine these with like your Vesuvian Duplimancy and just getting multiple of these elementals on the battlefield. You can have a really good time. All right, what a cool one, huh? So here's Lord Dracus, and these are our like really sweet mutate cards that like we're going to be very excited about like mutating Illuna and then like mutating onto it again for like a very cheap casting cost and like having the benefit of like getting maybe an instant or sorcery back from our graveyard. That'd be very nice. So Lord Dracus is really cool. And these are all the beautiful mutate cards. You can see the borderless treatments that they did for all these. So even the uncommon cards got the nice little treatments. And it's just so wonderful to have a set that really takes time and care. And hopefully Wizards can get back on track with that because you can look back at these sets and you're seeing like, wow, these cards, there was a lot of care put into these things. And I think Foundations is kind of like that where they definitely did some treatments for uncommons, but this was very thematic. The Ikoria set was beautiful. So, and more, and very strong, of course. So you have like low cost mutates, once again, like a Sea-Dasher Octopus, wonderful card. Also just these very low cost, beautiful mutates, Gem Razor to get into those artifacts or enchantments. Then we have Migratory Greathorn, probably like one of the OG ones, probably one of the more popular mutates. Just go ahead and mutate onto something and then fetch a basic land card and put on the battlefield tapped. Beautiful. Parcel Beast, probably one of the weaker mutates, but it has a low mutate cost, so it kind of keeps our train going. But there are instances of like having a Parcel Beast kind of go off, especially like if you have an Ivy, for instance, and you have, make two Ivy Parcel Beasts, and you start like kind of, drawing cards or putting lands on the battlefield. That's kind of interesting too. Dreamtail Heron for that nice mutate to get a card and add flying to whatever you're mutating on, which is very nice. Pouncing Shore Shark for a little board interaction. You're going to be bouncing things with this, bouncing creatures back to their opponent's hands for a low mutate cost. And then Auspicious Sterix, which is one of the most, famous, I would say, mutate cards. High mutate card cost, but, mutating onto an Illuna, and then all of a sudden, like, we're, deriving 2 permanents. Now, the thing about this is we'll also see land permanents. That's the difference between Illuna and Auspicious Sterix. So, you get more instances of permanents being revealed and put on the battlefield, but those also include a land permanence as well, just permanents in general. So that's the difference between Auspicious Sterix, but what an amazing card still. And then you have a Sawtooth Demolisher, just kind of impacts the board. If you're a problematic land or non-creature permanent is kind of bugging you, you can kind of remove it with a Sawtooth Demolisher in exchange for a 3/3 green beast creature token. Okay, and now we're getting into our exploration. These are our like additional instances of landfall. So This will give us an extra land to be played on each of our turns, so really nice verbiage to play there. We can even play our multi-face land cards because it is a play. It does not say put. So play is one of our very nice things to say when you see a landfall card. Play is a very important keyword. So especially when we're running like our multi-face land cards, it can be like instants or sorceries or creatures. So exploration is a massive card for us. This in the opener is just going to be like probably a good game most of the time because we're just going to be so ahead on lands, and we just have a good amount of lands in here in general and ways to kind of keep the lands flowing. So we love exploration. It's fantastic. Perfect one drop. Additionally, we have the cards that will enable additional land drops, and this one's really nice. It will do that, and it'll also fix your lands. And so lands will be every basic land type, so we can just have ease of mana. Like we don't have to think twice about it, which is really nice. And then Asusa is just goofy card because, as long as we can keep the lands flowing, and we will have ways, we're just going to be able to play 2 additional lands on each of our turns, which is, guys, think about that. That's really strong. What a bomb she is. Beautiful card. And then we have to figure out the ways. And for me, I believe your most consistent way of putting those additional land drops and not gassing out, because what will happen is you'll play at the lands, but you need to have ways to kind of continue the lands because you are losing cards. So Crucible of Worlds, this effect I believe is the strongest and most consistent because we'll have fetch lands that will put lands into the graveyard, and then we can continually keep playing the lands from our graveyard without recourse. We don't have to worry about missing lands off the top of our deck. We can simply go from the graveyard and keep that gasoline rolling. There's also good effects where you could have a Crucible effect, and maybe you want to, and you're working off the top of the graveyard too, and maybe you just want to shuffle, get into more permanence. So you could just pull out a card from your graveyard, shuffle, and then you can kind of look for more cards on top of your library. And that's what's really great about these colors is you play a lot from the top of your library in your graveyard. So here's Ramunec Excavator. You may play land cards from your graveyard. Conduit of Worlds, similarly, you may play lands from your graveyard. Then it has a really cool effect. Choose target non-land permanent card in your graveyard. If you haven't cast a spell this turn, you may cast that card. If you do, you can't cast additional spells this turn. Activate only as a sorcery. Fantastic. So really can keep you going in a bind, huh? Case of the Locked Hothouse. This will enable an additional land to be played on your turns. And if you have 7 or more lands on your end step, you'll solve the case. And what it means by that is once you solve it, you may look at the top card of your library anytime, and you may play lands and cast creature and enchantment spells from the top of your library. So really the good ways to play off at the top, really makes it easy for you. Here's the Oracle of Moldaya. She makes both of those functions of playing from the top of your library and only lands in this case. That's what she offers, and an additional land as well. So we love that. Rada. So this is just a nice one too, where of course you can play lands from the top of your graveyard. From your library. It's just another nice instance of being able to get out of our hand because we're going to be, we're going to lose the lands. We're not going to have any more lands to play, and then have a chance to play from the top of our library, which goes really well with the Asusa and exploration type effects. So there's that. Of course, Reality Chip is just what a team up that is with an Asusa. This thing gets really busy, right? You can basically have a 2-man wrecking team with an Asusa and a Reality Chip. Just go ahead, slap a Reality Chip on Asusa, and you'd be playing all the lands from the top of your deck and spells, and you won't even need a hand anymore, basically. It's kind of what we're looking at here. Here's Augur of Autumn, and that is just another nice one where we're playing from the top. So we didn't hold back. We're playing from the graveyard. We're maxing out, our Ancient Green Warden effects, our Augur of Autumn effects, playing from the top of our library. This one will offer creatures to be played as well from the top of your library, as long as you have creatures with 3 different types of powers. So for instance, an Augur of Autumn is a 2/3, an Illuna is a 6/6, and we have a Nissa that's a 3/3, and then we meet that criteria and we can start actually casting creature spells from the top of our library as well. Here's Experimental Frenzy, just another one of those instances where if we have an Asusa and we only have 2 cards left in our hand, and we're ready to like start playing more lands, we can slap down an Experimental Frenzy and like roll the dice, and see how far the rabbit hole goes. And we can start to play cards from the top of our library and spells as well, lands and spells. So, but you can't play cards from your hand anymore. So that's interesting. It does have a failsafe where you can destroy it. But honestly, once I have a Frenzy down, I'm going with a Frenzy typically 99% of the time. Here's this Soul Ring. Of course, this card is busted, and just having that two extra mana like in an early game sequence is really, really strong. You don't even have to have another play like on your turn one, which we won't. But for instance, if you have like a turn two where you play, for instance, a Nissa from your forest and a Soul Ring mana, and you go into a fetch land, all of a sudden like you're getting ahead a ton of mana and cards all at once. So this card enables really good sequences for us. It also gets us closer to Mutate with Illuna. Then we just have some really nice just choices here for a Mutate in general. So Elvish Mystic will be a nice mana dork that we can mutate onto. Similarly, a Fyndhorn Elf would meet that criteria to mutate onto as well and just be a nice mana source in the beginning. Delighted Halfling, all these are not humans. They're non-humans, so we can all mutate on them, and they will create mana for us, which is fantastic. Delighted Halfling is beautiful for Illuna. Birds of Paradises, of course, with just various types of mana. Then we have the beautiful like 3 visits type of effects. Nature's Lore, 3 visits, those really nice 2 mana spells that will fetch us up a forest of any kind and just put it on the battlefield. It won't be tapped at all unless we like bring out a Surveil land or, for instance, a Triome, which you could also find because those are forest cards. So just very valuable cards for us. 3 visits and Nature's Lore, fantastic. They're similar effects. They do the same thing. Aftermath Analyst, this is kind of similarly still geared for our ramp package. And you can imagine just Aftermath Analyst, if we're playing enough lands, it's going to mill maybe 2 or 3 lands from its center of the battlefield. And when we're ready to pop this thing, it's going to return all those land cards to the battlefield. Very, very good enabler for like our Lotus Cobras and Nissas of the world that love to see lands hit the battlefield. And here's the aforementioned Lotus Cobra. So, of course, this is just a really nice one where it's going to add mana based on the lands that come onto the battlefield. And if you have, your fetch lands coming in, the ones that can go search your library for more lands, then you're going to have basically, the 2 instances of the Landfall, and then the land that comes in untapped, usually. So that's just like 3 mana generated all of a sudden for 1 land, as long as you have this on the battlefield. So just some really powerful stuff. Nissa is like the aforementioned one where if you do, it does have the Lotus Cobra effect where it will, if you play a land, it will generate mana, which is nice. However, if you have 2 lands that enter the battlefield on the same turn, this will trigger once a turn. It'll actually fetch up an elemental or elf. And you can see we had some really juicy elementals, so we might get lucky sometimes, get a really sweet elemental out of the picture, like a Shaya, a Royal Elemental, or Ancient Green Warden. Tireless Provisioner, similarly on the same level as Nissa, where you have to imagine that this will actually bank the mana too into treasures. Typically, you could also create foods if you needed some life, but typically you're going to be creating those treasures, right? So, yeah, this is just a really strong sequence. Like, once again, similar like a Soul Ring, turn 1. Then turn 2, you lead with your Provisioner, and then you play your lands. And if it's a fetch line, you're generating 2 treasures, and then a land is ready to go, and you could just bank those for later for your, like, Illuna Mutate. It's just a very strong, like, play pattern, Here's Uro, and this one's just a really nice one that's going to like draw a card. We can play an additional land for the turn when it enters the battlefield, and later on we can escape it for its escape cost and have it actually stick as that 6/6. But each instance we'll get a card, we'll get some life, and we'll be able to play an additional land, which is really fun for us. Here's Blossoming Tortoise. It's a fantastic, like I said, great enter the battlefield card. Great on attacks too. It's just like a really buff Solemn Simulacrum if you think about it. It's just like continually gets that value over and over again for you. So we just love this card. And there's a Solemn Simulacrum. Of course, we did not hesitate to include the Solemn. No, Solemn, you're in here. Don't worry, dude. You're going to bring us some nice lands. And if we, for instance, have a Vesuvian Duplimancy out on the battlefield, you know it. We're going to be mutating onto you and get some more basics. So that's definitely a great choice where it enters the battlefield, put a basic land on the battlefield top. When it dies, you may draw a card. Here's the Scooty Boy, and Scoot Swarm is just a nasty, nasty one. So hold on, let me get some of my, I got some hot cocoa, guys. It's really nice out in Vegas. Oh, that's good. Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, Scoot Swarm, you know, I'd be frightened if I was the opponent. I get kind of scared, you know, when I'm playing the Scoot Swarm, I'm not messing around, you know, like I'm there to get busy with a Scoot. I'm not going to make like, you know, just 20 Scoots. I'm going to be making like hundreds. I'm going to make hundreds of Scoots. You're going to be dead. So after your 6th land is on the battlefield, Scoot Swarm will start making more versions of the Scoot. And as those lands keep on coming in, they'll create more instances of the Scoots. And the Scoots create the more Scoots, and you have a lot of Scoots. And it gets kind of crazy. And this card has also been known to crash MTG Arena on many instances. So that's kind of fun. So that's cool. Sylvan Library for some cards. We love that. Just get some into some cards. Now we're getting into some of our interactive spells, and we spare no substitutes. You know, this is it, guys. You know, spare no expense. An offer you can't refuse. Just a sweet 1-mana play. Like, there's nothing wrong with like that 1 blue. You know, that infamous 1 blue that's just waiting there. You know, it's like, well, what is it? Well, this one's going to get all the non-creature spells. It's going to give your opponent 2 treasures that you know, when you counter that non-creature spell, but that's no big deal. Ugh, gross, huh, guys? Mana Drain. Obviously, probably one of the more feels bad cards, especially like, because, I mean, no one's not using this in blue, right? So, you know, it happens. It's like, oh, okay, I'm getting mana drained. It's fine. You know, it's kind of like, it's fine, you know, but it's just such a big tempo swing. It's like, well, what's going to happen? You know, what are they going to do with all that mana once they, you know, counter my, you know, 4-mana commander or whatever they've countered with this card? Because that's what happens. This will counter a spell, and then on the next main phase, the controller of the mana drain will add generic mana equal to that spell's mana value. So, you know, you could just all of a sudden, like, you know, have mana open on like, you know, turn 2, for instance, just waiting, and you can counter commander, and you can go like right into a Lumra. You know, there's like some nasty things. You can just like kind of get ahead real fast. It's just like really fast tempo swings with mana drain, and it's just an interesting card overall. Luckily, you only get one of them. Cyclonic Rift, similarly, is just like a big haymaker, right? Where, you know, you want to overload this thing and like return all your opponent's permanents to their hand, other than lands. So, and I mentioned this what Ashaya does, and I totally got gotten by that. I had a Cyclonic Rift, and I cyclonic my opponent who had an Ashaya on the battlefield, and nothing returned to their hand, and I was like, what? Like, what is happening here? And yeah, it's because they're considered lands. So just be aware of that. So this card will return target non-land permanent you control to its owner's hand for the generic in blue, or you can overload it for 6 and a blue. You may cast a spell for its overload cost. If you do, change its text by replacing all instances of target with each. So return each non-land permanent you don't control to its owner's hand. So just a big bounce for all your opponent's things, and it's just a really big card. Then we have some nice single target removal with a beast within, just to, you know, hit whatever you want, probably an enchantment or like this is just a game-winning card, right? You just have it kind of just sitting there, you know, have a good grip of cards, and then all of a sudden, like, your opponent might play something dangerous, and you'll be like, nope, I'm so sorry. I'm destroying that. You can have a 3/3 green beast token, though, instead. Vandal Blast. So this is just that nice one where you can overload this one and destroy all of your opponent's artifacts. We love that. Or just a single instance of an artifact for the red. It's fine. Then you have Blasphemous Act. This is just a nice thing that's going to impact the board. You know, we have our opponents that are comboing off, and they're about to win with their creatures, and then all of a sudden it's like, sorry, Blasphemous Act. And we kind of just got to reset and see who can outvalue who at that point. And I like my chances with all the lands. I really do. I like a little bit of a longer game with this one, to be honest, guys. Disciple of Frailes. This is just that nice land card that can, you know, we can sacrifice a creature with a high power and then go ahead and draw X cards. So it's just a nice gas up for us. We have some nice bodies in here. Seagate Restoration for just hopefully a decent amount of cards. You know, sometimes this will only draw you a card. It will be like a 7-mana cycle, but you know, in most circumstances, it's definitely worth drawing. And sometimes you just draw a ton of cards, like, you know, 8 cards at a time with it. So it's really cool. Or it can be a land, and that we don't hate that. Turn Timber Symbiosis similarly can be like fetch up a nice creature for us, or just act as a land. So that's cool. Sink into Stupor. That's a little bit of a lower cost one that can actually bounce a non-land permanent to its owner's hand, or a spell that can be act as a land as well. We have to pay 3 life for those. Jawari, this one will come in tapped if we just play it as a land, but it can also be a sneaky counter spell. And if an opponent taps out, we can, you know, kind of have a Gotham moment and play a Jawari, and that's kind of a sneaky one for our landfall where it can benefit us. It's a land. It's also a spell that can be a counter spell, so it's cool. Lots of risk reward, you know. So Beseju, Who Endures. This is also a channel land. Beautiful channel land. I'm so glad I get to play these. In my Omnath Locus of All, I kind of had to like not play these because I had to fix my mana so much. But now that we're in Temur colors, we can play like our channel lands. We can even play more basics now too, which is a much better position for us than the 5-color Omnath. But I will include the Omnath Locus of All deck where it landed. It's beautiful. I think I kind of took it to the most, you know, for a brawl format. Obviously, there's upgrades to be had there for you, but for a brawl format, it's just fantastic. So there's that. Beseju, Who Endures. That's a nice channel land. It can, you know, hit artifacts or enchantments or non-basic lands. In exchange, your opponent will find a basic, or is it any land with a basic land type, and they put it on the battlefield. That's wonderful. Okay, so here's Otawara. That's a nice channel land that can bounce a artifact, creature, enchantment, or planeswalker to its owner's hand. Sweet. It costs less, of course, both Beseju and Otawara if you have a legendary on the battlefield for each instance of legendary creatures you have. Here's Hall of Storm Giants. It's like a nice, like, nasty 7/7 that we can get in with, like, because we're going to have so many lands, so we might as well just have something cool to, like, kind of animate if we have stuff that don't have much to do with our mana, and then we can start slamming in with a 7/7. Here's Stump Stomp, and this is just a nice interactive spell. This can kind of target one of our creatures, and it will do its power to another creature or planeswalker that we don't control. How interesting. Love it. Here's Bridgewater's Battle. This one was a fight spell, so that one's nice, and it can also act as a land. Fantastic. Lots of good support for this, archetype. Glasspool Mimic, you're gonna love that. Just to copy, like, your Solemn Simulacrums, your Adventures of Zendikar at the high roll kind of areas. Just overall, it could just be a land in general. So we just kind of love the Glasspool Mimic for all the things it does. These are all lands, so we're all in our lands, if you can believe it. These are also spells that can be lands, so they're on their backside. I don't know if you're not familiar, everybody, that these can also be played as lands, so there's the land side. And Balaget is really nice too, because this one will just kind of go into our graveyard and return to any card to our hand, or act as a land. We love it. Here's Command Tower, fantastic, just fixes our mana. Add 1 mana of any color in your commander's color identity. Similarly, Mana Confluence will do that, add 1 mana of any color to our mana pool for life. City Brass does that as well. When it becomes tapped, it deals the damage to you, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool, fantastic. Prismatic Vista is going to find us a basic of our choice, and it will just come into play. Not tapped, it's just a beautiful fetch land for us, for our basics. Then we have Fabled Passage. The criteria would be your 4th land. This would be coming in untapped. If you control 4 or more lands, when this is, you fetch your other basic, it will be untapped if that criteria met. If it's before that, it will come in tapped. So that's good to know. Then you have like a card like Cabaretti Courtyard, which is just a nice kind of sacrifice land. And we just love these, like with a Blossoming Tortoise or the Luma, because it can kind of continue our landfall chain if we do have landfall creatures or benefit synergies on the battlefield. Because what happens with Blossoming Tortoise and Aftermath Analyst and Lumra is when those lands are returned, they're returned tapped, so you can't fetch them. You have to wait, but this one just sacrifices itself immediately. So it is an interesting card, and definitely will play a copy. Then we just have beautiful fetch lands in here that will fetch red, green, or blue. So you have Misty, Flooded Strand, Scalding Tarn, Polluted Delta, Windswept Teeth, Verdant Catacombs, Arid Mesa, Bloodstained Mire, and then we have our beautiful basics. We got our Lord of the Rings here. This probably took us most of the time is getting like matching basics for this beautiful deck. So we have like all these beautiful Lord of the Rings forests here that are basics. We have 7 of those. We have 4 islands that we have here. Four of the beauties, and then 2 mountains. So some nice stuff. We have our Surveil lands, Hedge Maze, Commercial District. Those will just come in and let us look at the top of our deck, decide if we want to keep it there or put it in our graveyard. Perfect here. Really keep our land gas going in the early sequences, especially like our Susas. Like if we don't want a creature on top, we want to keep our lands going. Want to make sure that we put that card in the graveyard and have another chance at a draw for our land, for instance. Here's Steam Vents, Breeding Pool, and Stomping Ground, and Ketria Triumph. These are all our nice shock lands that can be fetched with our fetch lands, so they're beautiful. And we have all the colors represented, and our Ketria Triumph at the end. So there is the deck, everybody. I hope you enjoyed that one. This was a cool deck, and I believe this one will actually stick. You know, I do like kind of, you know, work to my next thing. I'm always working on to the next thing, but this deck just seems like a kind of a fun one to kind of, you know, let this one kind of sit there for at least a minute and kind of enjoy what it turned into. You know, overall, I think Anawan will be next. I'm going to revisit Anawan. So the Rogue fans out there, we definitely got some new tools for Anawan. It's very hard to keep up, but overall, like the Mirror Flash is just a very strong kind of archetype, and you have some really good characteristics, even if they're not roguelike. You know, you have the new Kaito and the new Enduring Curiosities and all these cards that are just so fantastic, like, and they just give you so much card advantage. It's really cool stuff. But yeah, I hope you liked this one today. And drop me a like or subscribe if you dig it, or comment, share with your friends. We're on our road to 300 subscribers, so it's fantastic. We got a ton off our Maria deck that we put out. You guys love that one, so I appreciate it. I hope you like this one too. This is definitely like a process, and for finding cool cards. We're revisiting old cards from our youth here. So shout out if you like, you know, find old cards that you had and you can still play them to this day. That's kind of fun. And yeah, that's the deck there. And of course, I'd be remiss without kind of showing you some of the, definitely still having a nice giveaway here. We're going to be celebrating our 300 subscribers. You just have to make a comment, just say what's up or something. You know, every video that I see, like, you know, I know some of you have been more active than not, but keep doing that. And, you know, I'll definitely consider each instance for each video of a comment. And we'll definitely be sending you some sweet cards. I have a Felia, Ketria, Zago Triumph. I think I'm going to add a Lodex Cobra to this. I got Doors of Durin, got a Maria here. And yeah, we'll probably even add like another couple cards, you know, be a fun like 300 subscriber giveaway. And we'll do it like, I think we'll just keep doing it. You know, I don't mind. It was kind of fun doing it the first time around. So, all right, have a good day, everybody. I'll see you later. Bye.